Week 13, matchups that matter. We are going to be breaking down everything that you guys need to know to set your fantasy football lineups. A lot of teams on bye this week. We got 6 of them, so we got to dig a little bit deeper today in our start-sit decisions, but I'll help you go through everything from over-unders to which positions have good matchups, shadow coverage, all that good stuff will be covered in today's video. You know what to do if you enjoy. Leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here. Now let's get into it. All right, so let's get things kicked off with the top 5 over-unders on the week. You guys can see them on the screen there. A lot of high-scoring potential matchups here. The Commanders-Dolphins game, Cowboys-Seahawks, Texans-Broncos, Eagles-49ers, and Saints and Detroit Lions. It's weird because we have a couple heaters this week. A lot of games over a 47-point over-under, but there's actually like no middle ground. There's like 5 really high-scoring games and then a bunch of low-scoring games and only like 2 games over a 40-point over-under. So it's a little bit wonky this week. We definitely want to hone our attention in, focus and consolidate our start-sit decisions into those high-scoring games if possible. Then you guys can see some of the lower-scoring games: Jets-Falcons, Buccaneers-Panthers, Jaguars-Bengals, Rams-Browns, and Patriots and Chargers. As far as implied point totals, again, these are based off of the over-unders, which teams we expect to put up a lot of points according to Vegas here. The Dolphins and Cowboys are set up to crush this week, so you definitely want to have players from those two teams into your lineup. Some teams are just straight up avoids. As you guys can see, the Bengals with a 14.75 implied point total, the Jets, the Panthers, the Patriots, and the Cardinals. Sneakily, we see the Lions up there with a lot of points, and the Texans and 49ers as well, all expected to put up at least 25 points in their games. So again, when you're going through your start-sit decisions, jot down which players have what going in their favor. Is their team implied for a lot of points? Do they have a good matchup? Are the Sharps betting the over on their game? Blah, blah, blah. You guys know the process at this point in the season if you've been following along all year. Now let's get into where the Sharps are betting. So you guys can see the Sharps that are on the over on my left, the Sharps that are on the under on my right. The 49ers and Eagles looks to be a spot that the Sharps love to shoot out. Same goes for the New Orleans Saints versus the Detroit Lions. Fire up your fantasy options in those games and use those to make some tiebreaker decisions if you can. Looks like we have some sneaky spots in the low 40s as well with the Rams-Browns game, the Steelers-Cardinals, the Colts, and Titans there. It looks like the Sharps are expecting more points than maybe Vegas is expecting, kind of speaking to what I said about how there being no middle ground this week. Maybe it looks like the Sharps are saying that there should be a little bit more middle ground. The Bucs-Panthers, Jags-Bengals on Monday Night Football, and then the Jets-Falcons. All of these games are looking like bad spots with sub-40 over-unders and the Sharps banging the under on those games. Thursday Night Football also looks to be a little bit of like a trap shootout. You guys can see there that the Cowboys and Seahawks game tonight is projected for 47.5 points, but the Sharps are taking the under 91% of the money there. So I would assume that speaks negatively against the Seahawks more so than it does against the Cowboys, but at the same time, maybe don't expect a massive fireworks shootout tonight because the Sharps are not expecting a massive fireworks shootout tonight. And we typically don't see those on Thursday Night Football anyway. So getting into the advanced data points, so these are things like fastest paced games and DVOA matchups. So the fastest paced games in terms of how quickly both offenses operate. We want fast-paced offenses going up against other fast-paced offenses because it typically means we're going to have more offensive plays and thus more fantasy production as a result. So for those of you guys that are keeping tally, it looks like the Saints and Detroit Lions game is going to shoot out because it's like a triple threat of high scoring, good offenses, and it's going to be fast up-tempo pace of play. And then the 49ers-Eagles game also checking pretty much every box so far with good offenses, with fast up-tempo play, and with good matchups there as well. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, it looks like Bengals-Jags on Monday Night Football and Falcons-Jets are triple threats in the opposite direction. They're slow-paced games, they're low-scoring offenses, and the Sharps are taking the unders on those type of games. So definitely keep that in mind when you're setting your lineups. Offensive DVOA versus defensive DVOA, thus creating a matchup advantage or disadvantage. These advantages are on my left, disadvantages are on my right. Of course, we want good offenses going up against bad defenses in an ideal world, and we want to avoid bad offenses going up against good defenses where we can find them. So no breaking news here telling you that the Dolphins are well set up to put up points against the Commanders. It's like one of the best offenses in the league versus one of the worst defenses in the league, especially against the pass. Then the 49ers offense expected to put up a lot of points here. Good matchup advantage for them. Same goes for the Kansas City Chiefs offense, the Houston Texans offense, although the Broncos have been playing much better on defense as of recently. But the one that kind of doesn't really fit here is the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? We don't really view them as a good offense, but they have improved since Matt Canada's firing in the last game that we saw, and they're now facing one of the worst defenses in the NFL in the Arizona Cardinals, especially against the pass. So this is a great spot for Deontay Johnson. It's a great spot for Pat Freiermuth, who just had the breakout game last week. Great spot for George Pickens if you're going to throw him into your flex. And if you're going to start these running backs, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, both inside my top 24 at the running back position. When it comes to the matchup disadvantages, the Los Angeles Rams, Carolina Panthers, New York Jets, Arizona Cardinals, and Atlanta Falcons, you probably want to keep those guys on your bench if you can help it, unless you have a must-start option like a Bijan Robinson or a Puka Nacua from those teams. You probably don't want to mess around with any fringe options like, Adam Thielen or even Marquise Brown potentially in those offenses, because they're not really well set up to have great matchups there. So moving on to the shadow coverage. So for wide receivers, we're looking at, who has good matchups against the opposing cornerbacks that they're going up against. We'll start it off here with the red shadow coverage. So guys that are going to be in matchup downgrades. So we want to temper expectations for these players or potentially outright sit them if they're on the fringe to begin with. So Marquise Brown going up against Joey Porter, that is a shadow coverage matchup. If you can help it, you should probably sit him, but if you don't have any other choices, definitely at least temper expectations for him. Garrett Wilson against AJ Terrell, again, if you can sit him, go ahead, but you most likely have to start him in that matchup. Christian Watson versus L'Jarius Sneed, I would outright sit. For sure, Jordan Love had a good game against the Lions last week, but it's a tougher pass defense against the Chiefs, and L'Jarius Sneed has shut down much better receivers than Christian Watson all season. And then when it comes to other matchup disadvantages, you can see Chris Godwin in the slot against Troy Hill there for the Carolina Panthers. They've been very good against slot receivers this year, so maybe leave Godwin on your bench. Drake London against whatever corner he's going up against, whether it's Sauce or DJ Reed, he could have a tough time there in that Falcons game. And then Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua against the Browns secondary. They have been the best secondary in the league, so they're probably going to need to be downgraded, although they are still probably in your lineup. So in terms of yellow matchups, so these are kind of neutral, like the wide receiver could win it, the cornerback could win it, we kind of don't know. The Commanders wide receivers going up against the Dolphins corners, I kind of just grouped them all together because it's technically a matchup upgrade to some degree because the Dolphins corners haven't been good, but specifically Curtis Samuel is the one that probably has the best matchup on the field of the Commanders wide receivers. So definitely if he was available on your waiver wire, go and pick him up. He is a good spot start for bye weeks this week. Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Again, the Broncos secondary has been better as of recently, but they have given it up to wide receivers over the course of the full season. So keep that in mind. If we get the recent Broncos defense, this is a tough matchup, but if we get some kind of combination of early in the season and now defense, then it could be a decent spot there for Collins and Tank. And then Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, like I said, both of them are in pretty good spots, although it looks like the opposing number one wide receivers do a lot better against the Cardinals, which would be Deontay Johnson in this situation, as opposed to opposing number two wide receivers, which would be George Pickens in this situation. So green matchups there. Some of these are going to be matchup upgrades. So if you have these guys on your bench, you're debating starting them, they are definitely guys that you want to have in your lineup. Josh Downs versus Roger McCreary. Great matchup there for the Colts slot wide receiver. And then Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, both great matchups against the Washington secondary. Ayuk and Debo, again, great matchups against the Eagles secondary. And Thielen and Jonathan Mingo, great matchups against the Bucs secondary. Don't really want to mess with Adam Thielen or Jonathan Mingo, but again, we have a lot of bye weeks this week. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have to start these players, so definitely just keep in mind that they do have a good matchup there. So getting into the quarterback positional matchups, we're going to go through top 5 and bottom 5 matchups for all of the major relevant fantasy positions. You guys can see the top 5 matchups for quarterbacks on my left, the bottom 5 on my right. Looks like we have an elite starting spot for Tua Tagovailoa. We really haven't had a big game from Tua in a while. It's been a couple weeks at the very least, and this one profiles as a potential shootout, bombs to Tyreek Hill, bombs to Jalen Waddle type of game. They just fired their defensive coordinator, did the Washington Commanders, so Tua Tagovailoa is a top 2 quarterback for me on the week. If you have him, definitely put him into your lineup. In terms of other options that have great matchups this week, it's not the greatest types of quarterbacks that are in good spots. I don't think anybody's starting Bailey Zappi or, Tim Boyle or anything like that, but I would say if you're in need of a streamer because you have Josh Allen on bye or whoever else on bye, I will say that Russell Wilson is probably the best option that you're going to find there who's widely available. If you're desperate, I don't think Kenny Pickett is a brutal option, but we do know that the Cardinals are weak against running backs, so it wouldn't shock me if the scoring comes from Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris in that game as well. As far as the quarterbacks with bad matchups this week, leave Matthew Stafford, leave Desmond Ridder, leave Jordan Love despite the good performance last week, leave Geno Smith on the bench if you guys can help it. If you have, a Josh Allen on bye, I would highly suggest you go after Russell Wilson on the waiver waiver wire or somebody like that, as opposed to the guys that I just named, because they have tougher matchups. In case you're curious, I would definitely start Russell Wilson over a Jordan Love or a Matthew Stafford or a Geno Smith this week. So the running back position, you guys can see, again, the top 5 matchups on my left, the bottom 5 matchups on my right. Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris are both RB2s for me this week. They have the easiest matchup on the slate at the running back position. We still are awaiting word on the Dolphins' backfield situation. Of course, I'll cover that on the running back tier list video. But as of now, I mean, I have Raheem Mostert as an RB1, and if Achane plays, he'll be in the RB2 range because both of these guys are very well set up in a good game script against the Commanders. Definitely start Ramondre Stevenson, start Bijan Robinson as well. He's one of the lone bright spots in that Jets-Falcons game in terms of matchups, because he does have a good matchup on the ground. The Falcons pass catchers not so much, but he has a good matchup on the ground himself. And then also make sure to start Devin Singletary as a low-end RB2 this week as well. We'll see if Dameon Pierce eats in more to his workload, but as of right now, I think he's the starting running back, Devin Singletary, so I would probably be comfortable throwing him out there as an RB2, low-end RB2, high-end RB3 at the best case scenario there. And then on the flip side, we have some tough matchups for Christian McCaffrey, tough matchups for Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, the Lions running backs, although we saw Bijan Robinson cook the New Orleans Saints last week, so maybe that's not really that big of a worry. And then Kyron Williams, also a really tough matchup against the Browns, but all of those guys are still top 16 options for me. So if you're wondering if you should start them, I still probably would in most cases. As far as the guys that are more so on the fringe here, we have Zach Charbonnet and Chuba Hubbard. Both of these guys are good volume plays because it looks like Kenneth Walker will be out tonight against the Dallas Cowboys. It's a tough matchup for Charbonnet, but I think 85% of the snaps or whatever he had against the 49ers is enough to keep him in the top 24 as a guy that I'm still comfortable playing this week. And then with Chuba Hubbard, he had a solid enough workload that I still think he's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a difficult matchup, but I still think given the amount of guys that are on bye this week, you're probably going to have to put Chuba Hubbard into your lineup if you got him. So the wide receiver position, again, I covered a lot of these wide receiver matchups in the shadow matchup stuff, but elite spot for elite wide receivers like Michael Pittman Jr., Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, as I talked about, and Chris Olave, if he plays, also has a pretty good matchup against the Lions secondary. And of course, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, also a very good matchup against the Eagles secondary. So some less auto start options that I also really love this week. If you guys are curious, Josh Downs, as I talked about, great spot for him. And same goes for Demario Douglas if you guys are in need of some flex production there. And as far as some guys with difficult matchups at wide receiver, we have tough spots for some of the studs like CeeDee Lamb and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and even DK Metcalf going on tonight. Guys on the fringe that I think are borderline sits, if you guys have better options, include Drake London, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Brandon Cooks, I'm still probably going to play, even though he has technically a tough matchup, because the implied points that the Dallas Cowboys have tonight is just too much to the point that I can't leave Brandon Cooks on my bench as like a flex option. And then for Green Bay, if you guys have Christian Watson, I would probably leave him on your bench, but because he's getting shadowed by L'Jarius Sneed, that could open things up for Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs. If you guys are in need of some deeper league flex plays, I think both those secondary wide receivers for the Green Bay Packers make for good options. Then we get to the tight end position. You guys can see some of the top matchups for Evan Ingram, for Dalton Schultz, for David Njoku, and for George Kittle. All of those guys are top 8 options for me. They're all great starts if you need them. And then as far as a streaming option, if you guys are down bad at the tight end position, you have Kincaid on bye or something like that. Logan Thomas should be widely available in a lot of leagues, and he makes for a really good streamer this week. As far as guys that have bad matchups at the tight end position, Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson, not in very good spots this week, but both guys are probably still in your lineup given their target shares and their implied point totals in the case of Jake Ferguson. And then I would say if you guys are looking to stream a guy like Tyler Higbee or a guy like Tucker Kraft, maybe pump the brakes a little bit, although there's still probably decent streamers if you're desperate and you have a Kincaid on bye or something like that. I'm just saying they have bad matchups this week, so don't put all your eggs into that basket. I would rather play a guy like Logan Thomas, for example. So the defense and kickers, you guys can see the top matchups on my left and my right. Some of the top streaming defenses this week include the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Jets and Tim Boyle. That's just absolute free cash, easy money there. The Miami Dolphins going up against the Commanders. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home against the Carolina Panthers there. Los Angeles Chargers against Bailey Zappi and the Patriots. And then Los Angeles Rams against the Cleveland Browns and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, PJ Walker. We don't exactly know who's going to start this game, but either way, the Rams are a decent option for their streaming matchup this week. So again, that is the end of the video. video. If you got some value from this, if you feel like I helped you set your lineups, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel. If you guys are new around here, leave as many start-sit questions down below as you want. I'll try and answer as many as I can. As well, if you want answers to your start-sit questions, tune into today's live stream. Make sure to check out our weekly rankings manifesto, which is available like our rest of season rankings, our dynasty rankings, our brand new dynasty and redraft trade calculator over on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off. Me and Danny are actually recording a bonus episode. If you guys have, not quite taken the plunge to sign up on Flock yet, we are going to be doing a bonus weekly episode only for Flock Fantasy subscribers. So if you guys want to make sure you get access to that video each and every week, you want to sign up over there using promo code FSE. And of course, you also get first dibs on dynasty decisions, a free Zoom consultation if you sign up annually when you use our promo code. So that will be linked down below in the pinned comment if you're interested, and in the description as well. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.